Hey guys, welcome back to another What If Here. Today we're doing part 18 to What If Kurama's chakra turns now into a female. If you're not watching the last part, there'll be a link in the description down below which will take you to a player's rate. Watch part 1 all the way through up until 18. Anyway. Also guys, after you watch this there'll be a poll, possibly in the link in the description down below, which is just take you to the community tab where you can vote yes or no as to see if you guys want this obviously something to continue, because it's currently low viewership, so I just want to know if you guys want this to continue, and that will be every week. Anyway, with that, let's get into it. Let's get into it. So it'd been after somewhat the attack and that the next day, and he was in, well, you'd know obviously due to somewhat, like obviously sand attack, and Orochimaru took sand into attacking. So sand or Suna had to and did somewhat pay for all these somewhat damages, and though that alliance was somewhat at the moment a bit shaky, though was slowly getting stronger again. And a day or so, and he'd also had someone decide to personally promote Naruto, as he believed, she was somewhat ready. She'd freed the first and second Hokage from Orochimaru's control, and had even managed to summon the Shinigami, and had the Shinigami take Orochimaru's soul instead of hers, which he'd would thought he'd see the day where the Shinigami would end up taking an opponent's soul and not the one that summoned it. So Haki'd believed that he'd die that day. He was 100% prepared to die, yet he was still in his somewhat chair, signing papers and that. And of course after that, I can't remember his name, Konohamaru, someone giving out a big hug and somewhat thank her for saving his grandfather, Hiruzen, from death, pretty much. And of course, somewhat word got around, and people somewhat started calling her the somewhat Shinigami, the summoner to the Shinigami, which, well, someone Hiruzen thought was kind of ironic, because he could summon the Shinigami and just have somebody else pay the price for her to summon it. And anyway, though, and somewhat Hiruzen and San somewhat agreed to somewhat wait a day or so, so kind of somewhat got stable again, having calmed down, to then somewhat restart up the tuning exams, though Naruto of course wouldn't now be in it due to the fact she'd been promoted to tuning, though some people wanted her to be promoted to either Jonin or special Jonin. Hiruzen said that she was at least somewhat Jonin and probably, or even Aunt Boon speed, but the majority of her skills were tuning, borderline Jonin, like low Jonin, so it'd be best at the moment to keep her at tuning, and within the next couple months, somewhat see, and if they were right, then he or the next Hokage would promote her to Jonin or special Jonin instead. And yeah, he used somewhat, and and of course at the same time, he'd somewhat called upon Jiraiya and Naruto. So whilst the training exams would somewhat retrial of the third part of the training exams would happen, Naruto and Jiraiya would leave the village to go hunt down the fifth Hokage, none other than Tsunade Senju, as Jiraiya had somewhat declined the position, as he didn't see himself fit to become Hokage. And yeah, so yeah, we'd somewhat actually end up we'd end up seeing the tail end of a fight with someone Naruto, who was her opponent. Well, none other than Tsunade. It'd be the somewhat a similar position from in canon, where somewhat Naruto would somewhat try and do canon Naruto, so male Naruto, would try and do the Rasengan imperfect, and Tsunade would end up whacking Naruto, causing Tsunade to somewhat realise and quickly end up making a new bet due to the fact she'd broke the rules. Anyway, a somewhat similar thing would go down between her and though the somewhat obviously week would generally obviously go by once they'd find her somewhat like in canon with Naruto trying to perfect the Rasengan, trying to get it down. She was close, and she could easily perform with the Fox's chakra or somewhat with her own Talpi's chakra, but of course she could rarely somewhat use that due to somewhat dry keeping a somewhat eye on her, so she wasn't 100% sure if she could, but she theorised when she when Dry had gone for a minute or so, she'd quickly tried somewhat clearing his chakra and she could easily form it. So yeah, she'd presume that her own chakra would maybe give the same benefit, then again maybe not, because Kurama's acted like a cloak, whilst her own didn't physically change her, or well, it at least gave her 2 foxes and 3 foxtails, 2 to 3 foxtails, or at least 2 to what she could remember. Anyway, though she'd somewhat end up busting the wake as she'd throw Kuna as someone would bust through the door. But I thought was intruder, though somewhat to Kuna would end up somewhat grazing enough to draw blood on the person, as should somewhat hear a yelp. As Naruto would somewhat look and go, oh, Precision, she's somewhat yawn, what's wrong? And why for Kami's sake would you burst through the doors? She somewhat said that Tsunade was gone. Naruto tried to go, so the somewhat old bat decided to somewhat leave instead and somewhat abandoned you. So Susan's eye would somewhat twitch as before she could somewhat respond. Somewhat dry, somewhat once again end up somewhat frightening Susan, though Naruto would end up throwing Kuna out of the window, somewhat actually scaring Kabuto from his spying thing. Yeah, though Naruto would somewhat end up walking over to, somewhat walk over and whack the person on the head as somewhat have a somewhat grunt of pain as she then somewhat look over to Susan and go and someone asks, well, would tell her to go into Dry's room next door and drag the stupid pervert into his room so that she could, for Kami's sake, get changed out of her nightwear and into her shinobi outfit. She's and some of them blink and then really would realise that, oh right, Hato's not dressed yet, and would you do so a minute or so late, well, 3 to 5 minutes later, Naruto would be dressed and they'd be somewhat on their way from hopping from tree to tree to where Tsunade was. And yeah, Naruto somewhat had got a feeling back since she'd summoned the Shinigami to somewhat to take Orochimaru's soul, that she knew that the snake would be back, just somehow he would be back from the dead. And she didn't know why, but this, yeah. And somewhat lo and behold, when they'd arrive, who they'd somewhat see besides from Kabuto would be Orochimaru. And somewhat the initial fight would go down slightly the same, though Dry would somewhat deal purely with Orochimaru, and Naruto and Susan would deal with Kabuto. Yeah, though eventually someone Naruto would end up doing would someone end up making, would actually end up someone using a bit of his chakra to form the Rasengan, not having to make a clone. It would somewhat be a bit faster and would end up drilling, doing somewhat, it would have a more explosive force. Thus, Kabuto wouldn't be able to do any damage to Naruto's heart this time. And so it'd be somewhat, unlike in canon. So it'd be from that, and Dry would somewhat end up smiling, and obviously Tsunade would somewhat just be being shocked, though for a different reason now. Instead of her fear of blood, it would be the somewhat shock and somewhat amazement that she'd managed to form the Rasengan, something she'd said to her that was was somewhat impossible for her to ever learn, yet here she was perfect, doing it just fine. And so though of course Orochimaru would somewhat end up going after her even more due to the fact that she could summon the Shinigami and that. So though Joy somewhat tried to yell out Naruto just turn somewhat in time and to somewhat see those, though just as she'd somewhat about to jump away, the somewhat Tsunade would get in front of her and somewhat shock her, surprise her. She may be somewhat fast, but obviously standing on a completely another level when it came to speed. And so they somewhat battled for a bit when somewhat the three Sun would do the three-way deadlock when so Orochimaru, Dry and Tsunade would do the summoning jutsu. Naruto would be somewhat beside somewhat Tsunade, would obviously end up being somebody taken up and anyway though Tsunade had already somewhat given a somewhat necklace to Naruto, and yeah, she'd somewhat, though, somewhat once this would clear though, Naruto, somewhat after a bit of deciding telling Kurama, Kurama's go, so it's time to end Kit. It's Naruto and just go and go, yeah, I guess it's time. So I reveal I guess the true power I hide within, as the function just not as should somewhat turn to Tsunade and go, well, no, somewhat I prefer to somewhat stand on my own 2 feet on the ground, or I guess in this case pause. Tsunade would look at Naruto a bit confused when Naruto just simply jump off of Katsuya, as there'd then be some a giant puff of smoke as they'd somewhat all raid, and Tsunade would just still be confused up until the smoke would clear and the mouth would somewhat just unhinge and should. And what enough? Yeah, it was clearly, not the Nine Tails, because from what she'd remembered from, like, her grandmother, Mito, describing, the fox, it was a fiery orange, a somewhat reddish fiery orange fur colour. This, on the other hand, was somewhat Naruto was a somewhat violent purple fox with somewhat 3 beautiful swaying tails. And dry, somewhat dry, and they would all somewhat be surprised, and Orochimaru would somewhat obviously somewhat laugh and go, well, how interesting. No, what a shame. I guess I should have tried to put a curse mark on her eyelid. Doesn't matter. As soon then somewhat her 3 tails would somewhat end up going over her back. Well, it would somewhat stop swaying and would curve over her body, and somewhat would stop. The tips of the toes would stop around somewhat mouth as a black ball would somewhat start to form, as Gambunta would realise what she was doing. That, from what he remembered 12 years ago, was a Tail Beast bomb, a very highly explosive ball of chakra. And though somewhat seen the size of it, it was clear that while he wasn't sure if there would be any damage done to them, but if Orochimaru didn't know what was going on, it should very much vaporize him, hopefully this time from the face of the earth. And somewhat to his surprise, should somewhat stop the growing of the just black sphere and would then proceed to just swallow it. As Tsunade, Shizu, Dwyer, Gambunta and Katsuya, even Orochimaru, that would somewhat be somewhat confused, and though Gambunta was somewhat wondering why does she do that, wouldn't she just explode herself? Of course, somewhat, though, and it would somewhat obviously start to somewhat expand / detonate inside when her mouth would somewhat blow up, and Gambunta would realise, oh no, it wasn't, she was just didn't know what, but it would end up somewhat just as Naruto was about to open her mouth to let the ball very much shoot out at a even greater velocity. Gambito like to get down, as Katsuya would obviously, and Gambito would obviously hit the deck somewhat, covering drier Katsuya somewhat, doing the same for for Tsunade, and even somewhat managing to drag Shizun somewhat into somewhat protection. As they would just somewhat witness a just bright white ball just fly across, and though sad for them, Mando to end up Vash summoning himself just in time, just barely in time. If he'd waited a second beforehand, my detonation would have occurred, and though it just flies straight through the smoke. And someone detonating a bit farther off in the distance. Though somewhat seeing that Naruto somewhat cast, they should end up somewhat releasing, not quite releasing though, should end up somewhat reverting to a more humanoid form. As though Gambit, those who'd somewhat end up just sitting down. Those who'd somewhat cursed out Gambit and go, "What the heck do you think he was telling you would have killed us?" That dude somewhat just look at it and go, "No, you would have probably been maybe a bit hurt, definitely shot back, but you wouldn't have died." I made sure it was small enough that it was small enough to somewhat not cause any somewhat damage besides from who I shot it at. Though Gambrinta wouldn't quite believe her. Though dry seasons, and I would still be something shocked, what, how was he like this? Though Gambrinta and Katsu would reverse summon themselves back, and Naruto would somewhat go into a more human form with so you just somewhat have violet eyes, I think violet slit pupils, and two foxes and her three somewhat foxtails all at the back dipped purple. Tsunade to ask what enough was her, or how somewhat she's like this, so she just simply state that that she was somewhat born somewhat slightly part-tailed beast. That was why I'm somewhat like this. I can generate tailed beast chakra, which is how I became a giant three-tailed fox, and how I currently am right now. And yes, this is very much my own tailed beast chakra. Snyder somewhat be shocked, though should somewhat realise how that would have been. After obviously being in Uzumaki, should realise that Kushina was the second Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, and that obviously with somewhat getting obviously pregnant, and the somewhat pointless chakra mixed obviously with the infant child to allow said somewhat infant child, now Shinobi, to generate our own tailed beast chakra. And though Dry wouldn't somewhat know what enough had happened, and so somewhat they would end up going back the next day. They'd end up going back to Konoha, though throughout almost the entire time going back to Konoha, Jiraiya was somewhat bugging. Well, even Naruto or Tsunade in power enough, so you could somewhat be born, part tail beast, and that was impossible. Though both would somewhat just call him an idiot, and though finally somewhat both of them would seemingly have enough with somewhat, with somewhat Naruto simply stating that, somewhat telling him to just somewhat shut up, or I should somewhat end up somewhat cutting off his balls, and that the next, and that instead of somewhat him giving all the somewhat cows sex, he'd be on the tail end of receiving it instead, which Tsunade go, that's a very good idea, as he'd somewhat crack her knuckles with a chocolate, with somewhat after that chocolate, a chocolate scalpel, somewhat become invisible and dry, somewhat pale, and very much Steve would shut up about that topic for the rest of the journey back, though. So I did ask who knew, which was mostly to somewhat just say that pretty much just the 9/10 works at summoning contract, the somewhat summoning someone, and summoning contract animal also knew as well. Tsunade and someone just nod, and it's somewhat they'd end up obviously going back to Konoha, and when they'd somewhat arrive, they'd somewhat obviously end up, a lot of people would go, Tsunade, somewhat Tsunade Senju's back, and somewhat others would, some others would somewhat say the somewhat Shinigami Summoner is back, which Tsunade would crack an eyebrow at Naruto, as Naruto would someone just say it was just a very odd story. Well, not odd, it's just he'd somewhat just sigh, and somewhat state that she'd just tell her later on, or he was in the red. So they would somewhat head off, and they'd arrive at the Hokage Tower. Hiruzen somewhat obviously meet them. Someone should ask if there was anything, though Naruto would somewhat ask if there was anything else, and if not, she would somewhat head home to just somewhat relax for the day. Hiruzen would just nod and somewhat though dressed up or had to come forward. She would, and Hiruzen would somewhat give her a scroll. She'd quack an eyebrow, and Hiruzen would say that would be the money for this somewhat mission. I would somewhat stare at her and would somewhat stand a bit shocked, as though Hiruzen was somewhat looking at Jiraiya and go, I'd ordered you, Jiraiya. I'd somewhat asked Naruto, and somewhat I deemed, or at least for Naruto, this to be a mission, not so much for you. So I'd somewhat look somewhat shocked at that. And Naruto then somewhat say bye as he'd leave to go home. And the rest of the day was just somewhat Hiruzen and sort of Tsunade just catching up. The two of them catching up with both of them revealing that Orochimaru was somehow back alive. And Tsunade somewhat would ask what was the obviously thing about the some civilians should soon calling Naruto the Shinigami Summoner. Should somewhat state that to summon Shinigami is to give your life. So how could she summon Shinigami and still be alive? And how could Orochimaru you know, someone die yet still be alive. Who's gonna go that part? I don't know, but I do know. Well, I was there for pretty much Mario's death in front of me. It would explain how, or at least, yeah, how somewhat it happened, and Tsunade would, would be surprised. Taki and Dry Eyes, sure he'd heard somewhat about it, but he didn't really think, obviously, Naruto could, someone do that. So she was, somewhat he believed that she was okay in Fuinjutsu, but he didn't think she was that good, at least. And yeah, though Tsunade would somewhat think it would somewhat be ironic that obviously being Uzumaki would somewhat be the only one to figure out a way to somewhat trade somebody else's to be able to summon it, yet switch her soul out for somebody else's. And yeah, and who's another thing, and that's why people call her the Shinigami Summoner, due to that the somewhat death penalty doesn't seem to apply to her, it just applies to her opponents instead. So yeah, Snyder just nod. And with that, guys, I'm gonna end this What If. Sorry for it being short, and yeah. Anyway, guys, if you have enjoyed it, tell me in the comments down below. And yeah, next, if you guys obviously want this to continue to obviously part 19, 20, and 21, obviously it would be next week. And anyway, yeah, guys, if you have enjoyed it, tell me in the comments down below. Have a good day, stay safe, have a good day on that one, depending on wherever you are and whenever you're watching this. And good